All right, guys, now time for part two of the Group 5 and Independence preview with Liam Blutman. If you didn't already, go watch part one where we cover the AAC, MAC, and Conference USA. There was some great stuff in there. This is going to be part two. We're going to be covering the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, and the Independence. That includes Notre Dame. So there's a ton of cool teams to talk about. The Mountain West, Fun Belt, always fun to talk about. Again, I said this last episode, but there's nobody that knows more about these Group of 5 teams and players than Liam. So I really appreciated having him on. I hope everybody enjoys these. And yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, do all that, and enjoy the episode. So the next conference we can dive into, we got two more left, is the Mountain West. The defending champion of the Mountain West is Fresno State, but obviously Jake Haener is gone, so that's a huge difference in that conference. I think the big question mark in this conference is the favorite is once again Boise State, and it'll be really interesting to see if Boise State can finally get it done. It feels weird to say that about Boise State, but they had won 4 straight conference titles before hiring Andy Avalos, and now this is going to be his third year, and he hasn't won it yet. And it feels weird to say like in year 3 there's pressure on a coach to win a conference championship, but years 1 and 2 just everything hasn't come together for them. And when you take over a program that's won 4 conference championships in a row, it does put a lot of pressure on you, but I think they are the very deserved favorites right now. But then Fresno State not far behind them, and then Air Force. I talked about how I like all of the service academy teams this year. This Air Force team is really good, and then San Diego State, that top 4 is kind of, I think, in their own league in this conference, and then a bit of a drop off to some of these other teams. But I can go ahead and go with my pick first, and I'll say it. I do think that Boise State's going to get it done. I think Taylon Green is going to be a really big upgrade at quarterback from what we saw from Bachmeier. I think their offense is just going to be nuts on the blue field this year. George Halani is a monster at running back. They have 2 really solid running backs, and they're going to be good on the offensive line. I really think they're just going to be able to put all the pieces together, and their offense is just going to be too much. I think without Jake Haener at Fresno State's just not going to quite have the firepower to keep up. And I do really like this Air Force team, and I'm going to talk about them later on in this, but I don't think they'll quite have enough to win the whole conference. So I am going with Boise State. What do you think about the Mountain West?
I am also going with Boise State. This is a team that I'm very high on. For me, it's toe-to-toe. Them and Western Kentucky as the best teams in the Group of 5. I give the edge to WKU, but I mean, I love Boise State, man. I wrote about them for our magazine, and I won't say everything I say in there because obviously I can't do that, but first-year OC Bush Hamden, former Boise State icon, coming back there, OC now. Gonna see a lot of good stuff from him. He comes from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, and he puts a heavy emphasis on the Shanahan-esque running game. So while you talk up George Halani and Ashton Shanti, how about an incoming freshman, John Brace Dubar, who's also going to get into the mix? And while Halani's a really good college back and probably the guy that most college football fans know, Jonty's the best back they have. He's an NFL talent, and Dubar's also an NFL talent. We just haven't seen Dubar take a snap in his career yet, but once people see him, they'll see that dude's a dog. And Jonty's an absolute monster, man. I wish I had him in my college football fantasy league. He's going to take off this year, going to be an extreme breakout talent. Taylon Green as well. He's the unicorn of our sport. The way that he gallops, the strides that he takes so effortlessly, making up so much ground, such high speeds, never being tackled. When he got in there and took off for a 74-yard touchdown against Oregon State last year, that was the snap that changed this team's season. The unfortunate part is they didn't realize that, and they kept going with Bachmeier. And while it wasn't always Bachmeier's fault, it was a marriage that was never going to work. So marriage that just couldn't sustain. And then you had to get rid of your OC too, which was good. They had to make tough decisions and move on and get into this next era. That night that they lost to UTEP and only scored 10 points is probably one of the most embarrassing nights in Boise State's program history. They got away with that instantly, but it wasn't quick. They struggled in the first half against San Diego State because that very next week, because they didn't hand the keys to Taylor Green. They didn't give him the keys to the offense. They didn't just let him run and thrive and carve out defenses and make it to where you've got to now respect the run game and be on the lookout for the pass. And they just weren't calling games well. And it's astonishing to me that they still went out there in Mountain West and dominated last year when they were not near the best of their capabilities. What worries me this year is their schedule is brutal. We're talking about Washington, the opener, which is a good test. And I think it will be a closer game than the experts think. What the spread's like 15.5 or whatever. But, the really good test for, before I dive into the schedule, really good test for both Boise State's offense and their defense. Their secondary loses a lot, right? It loses Jalen Skinner most notably, and Tyreek Jones and Caleb Biggers. But you're going to see Jalen Clark and Seyi Oladipo. They're going to be big-time guys in their secondary. They have a lot of really good players in their secondary that are just versatile and could play corner. They could play safety. They could play nickel. So you're going to see their defense with a lot of moving parts. So it's going to be fun to watch those guys get an early test against Roma Dunze and Joe McMillan and Michael Penix and the Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer passing attack. Like, that's going to be fun to see. But then you're going straight into UCF after that. North Dakota's a top 25 FCS team. And then you're at San Diego State on a Friday night. And then right after that, you're at Memphis. The schedule's just so daunting, and I don't understand why this extremely good team got tasked with such a difficult schedule, man. It's so unfortunate. It's just so unfortunate because if they didn't have this, like, their ceiling is 11. That's their ceiling. That's how good they are. Realistically, like 9-3, 10-2, but probably more so on the 9-3 side because you're playing tough game after tough game after tough game. Can you handle the wear and tear? I don't know. And we're also going to have to see big improvement from the offensive line. But, yeah, I mean, I went Boise State to win the conference because I just think they're the best team on paper. But as you and I know, being the best team on paper does not mean anything.
Yeah, no, as the number one Michael Penix fan in the world, having Washington having to play them week one, it does terrify me, the scenario where Washington just somehow loses to, not even somehow, it's definitely a realistic possibility,
feasible.
Loses to Boise State week one, and my Penix Heisman Washington National Championship future dies in week one. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, I do think this team is really good. And like you said, it is a brutal schedule, but I think it does slacken up a bit, like towards the middle of the schedule. So hopefully during that stretch, they can kind of get things back on track after the tough start, and then finish strong, and then go into the Mountain West Championship against whoever they're facing. And I think they would be the best team in that game, no matter who they face, by a decent margin. So I think as long as they, like you said, can kind of survive the brutal part of this schedule and stay healthy, then by the time they get into that final stretch of the season and into the championship game, they can really beat anybody in this conference.
It's just like it's cool for us, like, wanting to see them, or I don't know, because I just want Boise State to get back to that national relevance and prominence where they're competing for top tier bowl games and everything, and they're a mainstay in the top 15, right? If they survive the schedule, dude, goodness.
I think it's also a really interesting year for them with all the conference realignment going on, that at the moment they are somewhat on the outside looking in. Obviously, we don't know where all the dominoes are going to kind of end up falling with conference realignment. But I've read a couple of things about how the school administration and like the athletic department has almost like prepared. They're doing like a ticket deal that it's like for every game they win, they're like decreasing the price of tickets and being like, if we win, you guys win. We want people coming into the games. We want every game to be sold out. We think we're going to be really good. And it seems like they're almost like ready for, just as a whole athletic department, as a team, everything, to just kind of have this prove it year where it's like, we know we're really good. We're going to go out and put on a show basically. And basically whatever these conferences, these power conferences that survive, basically prove ourselves to them for why we should get one of these massive TV deals that's going to be coming up. So
it's cool that we find out how good this team is for real in the first 2 weeks of the season against Washington and UCF. We know right then and there how good this team is.
Yeah, so I think that should be really exciting. They should be a really fun team to watch. Their offense is going to be ridiculous. But the team I have is my surprise team, and it's kind of a sellout surprise team because they're probably, even on paper, the third best team in the conference. But I am going with Air Force. I just really love this team. I'll say it now, they're also my win total team. I'm taking them over 8.5 wins. Despite the fact that earlier I said I'm high on all the service academy teams, I think they're going to beat Navy and Army. I think they're taking the trophy for the second year in a row. And I think they're going to be the best of those three teams. They have a pretty easy start to the season with Robert Morris and Sam Houston. And then even home against Utah State, I think will be a pretty comfortable game for them. They have San Diego State and Wyoming at home. They have to go to Hawaii, UNLV in weeks 10 and 11, which should be two very winnable games for them. And then they do end the season at Boise State, which should be an awesome game. It's possible that that game could decide who makes the conference championship game, which would be pretty wild if that was the case. I do think that, especially at Boise State would win that game. But I think John Lee Eldridge is awesome. He's such a stud. They have a really good offensive line. I think everything about this team is basically built for what a successful Air Force team is supposed to look like. They literally have a center named Thor, which is just ridiculous. They have, I don't know, on both sides of the ball, they just have some really, really good players. And I think they're going to be the best of the three service academy teams. And I think they're the second best team in this conference. I like them more than I like Fresno State.
Yeah, so for this, giving the surprise team, I went with like what you said, to go with the team that could, maybe surprise and actually compete for the conference. I never went with who could fall off. I wanted to do that for Fresno State. I wanted to. So
I don't like them.
Yeah, I'll get my win total pick then first, and that was, what was their number? Fresno State under 8.5. That number is preposterous for people like us who know the college football scene inside and out, or we like to think that. Fresno State to win 9 games after you're moving on from the Jake Haener era is insane. That is an absolutely ludicrous number. It doesn't make any sense. And then you look at their schedule. Yeah, you're at Purdue. Who the heck knows what happens with Purdue this year? Eastern Washington is like an interesting FCS game in week 2. Eastern Washington's offense always excites. I know they're retooling though, and they haven't been living up to expectations in years past. At Arizona State in week 3, they got some funky thing here with their early part of the schedule where they're playing. I mean, even Kent State, like, we can include them. They're playing 3 FBS teams that are under new eras as well. So it's very weird. But I don't think that they should win at Purdue. I don't think that they should win at Arizona State. I'll give them Eastern Washington and Kent State, but that's already 2 losses, and they would need 9 to cash the over. Are they going to win at Wyoming in week 6? I don't think so. Are they going to win at Utah State the week after in week 7? I don't think so. Can they beat UNLV? I think UNLV could beat them even though it's in Fresno. Boise State, that game's in Fresno. I still would go with Boise State. Then you're at San Jose State. That's also a tricky game. At San Diego State to close your year, like, that thing is not easy in the slightest. And you're telling me that this team that now has to find the quarterback, they've got to find receivers now after Remigio and Cropper are gone, and you're bringing in Jalen Gill to see if that experiment works. And I like Jalen Gill. They're gonna have him be in that Nico Remigio role. But I mean, they lost so much talent. There's no reason that it should be 8.5 wins. It doesn't make any sense, especially with the schedule.
No, I'm fading them obviously in 2 ways, by picking Boise State to win the conference and then by picking Air Force to be the second best team. I'm not a Mikey Keene believer at all, and I don't think this win total number just purely at that one position is taking into account how big of a drop off it is from Jake Haener to Mikey Keene. Jake Haener is a guy that I think could be a legitimate NFL quarterback. And Mikey Keene couldn't even really keep his job against John Reese Plumlee when John Reese Plumlee couldn't even like throw a football. So I don't really get it with Fresno State. I think they're really going to struggle. And so did you have them as your surprise team in a negative way, or just as your win total?
I asked them as one total. I did a different surprise team so that we could stay on brand with the whole surprise and maybe make a run for a conference. But I'll still even touch on Fresno State here and add a few things. Never giving Jalen Henderson his shot last year, I think, was preposterous, and then he enters the transfer portal and ends up at Texas A&M of all places. So someone saw a very talented quarterback there. I think it's an extreme miss on Fresno State's behalf that they didn't evaluate him, and I guess that they didn't think of him as the guy. They lost to UConn last year when Haener was hurt. Logan Fife, I just don't see a quarterback on the roster that really moves the needle. And when Dylan Rubenking, who's co-founder of the transfer portal CFB, when he and I were interviewing Jake Haener during the NFL draft process, a Fresno State fan, we did fans ask questions. Fresno State fan asked Jake what he thinks of next year, what he thinks of Mikey Keene. Haener was dude. He blew Keene off instantly and went to talk about every other guy on their depth chart. Every other guy. He was not having it with a transfer. He's like Logan Fife, Joshua Wood. Maybe it's Henderson because he hadn't entered the portal yet. He went to name every other guy and dismissed Keene. I thought that was nuts to hear straight up. So yeah, I know that's because Haener lives and breathes Fresno State football. He is the Fresno State culture, the epitome of it. He doesn't want to see the torch passed to someone that he hasn't been close with and working with in years past. So I don't know. I just don't see it with Keene. I wouldn't see it with Fife. I'm sorry, Jake, but I don't know, man. I just don't see it with that team. I just don't get it. No. I saw the 8.5 win total. I was floored. I thought it'd have been 6.5.
Yeah, I think I think it could go really, really wrong. I think they could end up losing to a lot of these teams that are kind of middle of the road in this conference and in those out of conference games. But so who did you have as your surprise team?
My surprise team staying in the home city, it's UNLV. I am going with the Barry Odom first year. Brennan Marion is going to be a hot name to know for rising offensive talents, talented minds in our sport, right? He's going to be really fun to see his offense cook, and the UNLV offense has really fun pieces. Doug Brumfield, the tall, big lefty who could run you over, but also throw it 50-plus yards downfield on a frozen rope, has, a power 5 receiver talent-wise in Ricky White, who we saw from Michigan State. He and Brumfield had an instant connection that sparked last year. So I just really like this offense to find their footing. this season. Last season, they were in a lot of games and they just weren't able to overcome the circumstances, right? The San Diego State game was close, the Fresno State game was close, the Hawaii game was close. They dropped all three. They could have easily won. They could have easily beat Cal. They were so close to making a bowl game. I mean, we're talking about a team that started 4-1 last year, and then went on the what, 6-game losing streak. Is that I'm bad at numbers? They went on a 6-game losing streak in the heart of the season. You could erase that completely this year and figure it out and find your footing. You're going to beat Bryant to start the year. At Michigan, you'll probably lose. Hosting Vanderbilt is wild to think about. Who knows if they could win that game? Maybe they can. At UTEP, I would say, as a toss-up, you should beat Hawaii. I think you should win at Nevada. I think you should beat Colorado State, because I'm very low on Colorado State too. Not really on the Norvell plan. At Fresno State, we just slander Fresno State. I think that's a winnable game. At New Mexico's another winnable game. You have Wyoming at home. That's winnable. At Air Force, probably lose. San Jose State is also at home. It's another game that you could win. They just have so many games on the schedule that you look at and say, yeah, this team could win, because they have a legit quarterback. They have a legit WR1. They have a rising talent at OC, and they have a great culture now with Coach Odom that's instilling something. And, I just, winning's infectious. And hey, the Golden Knights did, so why can't UNLV? That's all I'm saying. They're gonna win more games than 5.5. That's for sure. They're making a bowl this year.
No, I like it. I mean, they're a team that I hadn't dug into a ton so far this offseason, but that's why we're doing this podcast, is to dive into more of these teams. And I do love Doug Brumfeld, and I think this team is definitely, based off everything you said. I was just kind of looking at all this stuff about this team as you were talking about it, and I was like, why haven't I looked at this team more? Because I do think it could be a really fun team, and I think 6 wins going to a bowl game is more than realistic for this team. So
if I could say one more thing, the hiring of Coach Brad Marion was the most underrated hirings in the entire college football landscape this season. What he brings to the table is a fun, flashy, fast, go offense with like some triple option concepts. And we talk about 6'5" lefty quarterback Doug Brumfield, who could run you over, that's going to orchestrate this. And he told us, watch out for so many trick plays. He told us Coach Marion, we interviewed him last month. He told us Coach Marion comes in to work each and every day with a new concept, a new idea, just fresh stuff, just radiates from his brain that he wants to implement in the season coming. And I mean, Brumfield said something I'm not going to forget, because it is so preposterous. He said, don't be surprised if we have 7 quarterbacks on the field at once. I looked at him like, dude, what are you talking about? 7 quarterbacks on the field at once? That's crazy.
That's insane. I think that would have to be a record.
I mean, that's where he was probably over exaggerating, but like that's where Marion's brain is gonna win over fans. Like, this is gonna be a must-watch team. While they might not have 7 on the field at once, they could have 2 or 3. Like, I fully believe that.
I mean, once you hit 3, it's already, you might as well have 7. That's ridiculous. As soon as you have more than 2.
The 2 QB systems is going to happen. Like, when I say 2 QB system, I mean on the field at once. It's happening with Montana State, with Touchdown Tommy and Sean Chambers. They would use them on the field too at one time. I think Lane Kiffin's very close to pulling the trigger on the 2 quarterbacks on the field at one time. We see the quarterback room that he has at Ole Miss right now. I don't know who UNLV's other guys are going to be in addition to Brumfield, but they might pull it out. And that's just, this is going to be a must-see game, must-see team, must-see offense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the team that I pay the most attention to, South Carolina was doing it last year with Dakarrion Joyner, who's technically a wide receiver on the roster now, but was a quarterback his first couple of years in school. And they would run awesome designs where you get him involved and don't know where the ball's going. And he's, talk about a guy, for people have been paying attention to college football, he's coming back for another year. He's been in college football for like a decade now, but I love him. So, but yeah, I think this team is great. I already said my surprise team is Air Force, and that's also my win total. But in terms of player to watch, I decided to get a little bit weird for the Mountain West. For my player to watch, I went with a kicker,
I
John
knew it.
Hoyland.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
From Wyoming. This guy is ridiculous. He's going to be an NFL kicker. He didn't miss a single PAT last year. He went 22 out of 25 on field goals. He hit 4 kicks over 50 yards. And he's kicking at Wyoming, which famously has some of the worst winds of any stadium in all of college football. The wind blows like crazy there, and he's just absolute nails. He's going to be an NFL kicker. And he's somebody that in this conference where there's a lot of games that there's a lot of teams kind of in the middle of the pack that are like 50-50 kind of coin flip games, having a kicker that can nail from 55, which he did last year, is just ridiculous and is a legitimate difference maker more than a lot of other positions on the field in college football if you have a kicker that can do that. So I'm going with special teams.
I kid you not, since I talked up so many other players in this conference, I was going to go and say Hoyland too. I love that you brought him up. It's hilarious that we were thinking the same thing. So for my player to watch, I'll go with someone that I haven't talked about, of course. I made a lot of bad remarks about this Fresno State team, so I'll talk them up a little bit. The passing defense is very good. Cornerback Cam Lockridge is, right now the best corner in the conference. So give Lockridge some love. He locks it down. He could be a guy that definitely makes a case for an NFL draft pick bid very soon.
There we go. He said one nice thing about this Fresno State team.
I love Fresno State too.
I know, me too.
Don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I loved them last year. I bet them to win the conference last year, so I was rooting for them hard all the way down the stretch. And I'm going to be a huge Jay Kaner fan in the NFL. So yeah, nothing against Fresno State. If you're listening and you're a Fresno State fan, we don't hate Fresno State. Just do not get the hype this year. So do you have anything else you want to say about the Mountain West before we move on? Or are you
No,
all
it's
good?
just a very, very fun conference to watch.
Always fun. So the last group of 5 conference is the Sun Belt. The defending champion of the Sun Belt is Troy. And this is going to be, it's always one of the most fun conferences. It's always really exciting teams. A few of these teams towards the top of the conference we've seen be really competitive and put together really, really good programs. Obviously, probably the first one that comes to most people's mind over the last couple of years is Coastal Carolina. Obviously in a transitional phase with Jamie Chadwell gone, who kind of built up that whole program, but they should still be really competitive. Another guy we just mentioned, 10-year college football players, Grayson McCall, was maybe going to transfer, decided to come back to Coastal for one more year. Marshall and App State, both really good programs that should have good teams. South Alabama, you've talked about a couple times already with being a team that I'm guessing you like since you've mentioned them a couple times already. Troy, the defending champs, should also have a really good team. ULL. There's really 6 teams in this conference, and equally balanced, honestly, 3 in the East and 3 in the West, that all could be teams that theoretically could compete for the conference. I guess the one thing that we can touch on before we get into these other teams that was a travesty last year is that we didn't get to see JMU play for the Sun Belt. They were the best team in that conference last year, I would say, and I think that's like the worst rule in college football, that they didn't get to play for the conference. And the fact that they still can't play for the conference their second year is insane, after proving that they were the best team in the conference last year. Not being able to do it again is terrible. So I mentioned those 6 teams at the top as the 6 teams with the best chance to win the conference, but obviously should also mention JMU because they should have another really good team. They just are not capable of or not eligible to win the conference. But so what do you think about JMU and then those other teams that are allowed to play for the conference?
I mean, I love JMU. I did we do a preview podcast for each conference we did last year, and we'll do it this year as well. I did 2 hours of the MAC and about an hour and a half on the Sun Belt, and I got some interesting feedback for saying that James Madison was going to defy expectations and go crazy last year and be a really good team. Of course, they did that, and yeah, the transition rule, college football, college basketball is the most idiotic thing I think I've ever seen. If you're able to compete immediately, you should be rewarded for what you're doing. It's such a joke. It doesn't make
Yeah, it
any
makes no
sense.
sense.
JMU's gonna win at Virginia week 2, so that'll be fun. I guess it's their Super Bowl. I guess it's their championship. It stinks that that's where we're at, but really good team, man. Latrell Palmer's a heck of a running back, so have fun watching him. And to I guess talk about teams that could actually win the conference, I do look at South Alabama, and it's because of a very good defense that was top 5 in rushing defense last year. They were top 25 in total yards allowed as a defense. I think like 25th or 26th in their scoring defense, and their passing defense is a lot better than it was actually ranked. You have Yam Banks, a star. He's on the cover of our season preview magazine. You have Caden Voisin's another good safety, and Marquise Robinson's a good corner, and just Wykevius Thomas in the trenches. Their defense is loaded. I think the unfortunate thing here about the Sun Belt is it might be the worst conference when it comes to tight ends. So we won't be talking about any Sun Belt tight ends unless you will, which might shock me because yeah, it's weak
No,
out there. If you're a tight end, you're looking for playing time, hit up the Sun Belt, please go play there. I really like the South Alabama team though, man. They're really good. You look at their schedule. You're at Tulane, I already talked about, could very well be a win. You have Southeastern Louisiana, who's a top 25 FCS team. You're at Oklahoma State. Is it, and then Central Michigan's your other non-conference game. Is it unheard of to say that, or is it wild to say that South Alabama could win at Tulane and at Oklahoma State? I don't think it's wild.
no,
I
no.
mean, there's a feasible chance that happens, and that's the beauty of college football. The South Alabama team could go compete with 90% of the teams in college football. This is a really good Sun Belt team that is, on the weaker side of the divisions too. So it's going to be fun to see them hopefully get to the championship game and win it.
Yeah, I do think they end up beating out Troy in the West. So looking at the other side of the conference, you have Coastal, Marshall, and App State, and this is my surprise team. My surprise team that I thought could compete for the conference is also my actual pick to win the conference, and that is App State. I think App State is going to be one of the most improved teams in college football this year. I think last year was just a really weird year for them. They had a ton of injury problems last year. Chase Bryce was just kind of weird last year. If you look at his numbers, he didn't even necessarily have a bad year, but he just kind of had some bad moments at inopportune times for them. And again, a lot of injury problems. And I think things just kind of didn't fall their way last year. But the thing that kind of pushed me, obviously Nate Noel at running back is a monster. He's maybe the best running back in the
NFL
conference.
caliber.
Yeah, and he's a beast, and they have a good offensive line for him to go behind. Christian Horn at wide receiver is another guy that's kind of a stud. and they bring in a couple transfers at wide receiver too. Scooby Ford from Mississippi State, SEC level talent that they're bringing in at wide receiver. So they have a ton of weapons on offense. And then everything I've heard about Ryan Berger, the redshirt freshman quarterback who should be the week 1 starter for them, has been really amazing. I saw something about Chase Bryce saying how good he thinks he's going to be and is going to take this program to like the next level. So I think this team is going to be really good. I think they're going to benefit from the fact that obviously JMU can't play for the championship game. So that's already some of your biggest competition. You don't even have to worry about beating you out in your division. I think Coastal is still going to be good, obviously, with Grayson McCall coming back, but having a new head coach, Chadwell being gone, I wouldn't want to bet on them winning the conference with that kind of change up with everything they've had for the last few years. So I really think that things kind of break App State's way, and in terms of the value, it's higher than Troy or South Alabama out of their division. So you're getting a little bit more value, and they get their biggest competition at home. They have Marshall at home and Coastal Carolina at home, which I think is crucial. If they can win those 2 games, I don't see how they don't win the division. So getting both of those teams at home is huge. They get a good early test going to North Carolina, which should be good for this team. So I'm taking the value, and I think if everything clicks for App State, they could be one of the surprise teams in all of college football this year.
I nearly went with App State as well. I think college football fans are going to be in for a treat when they watch Nate Noel. And with App State, you're always going to get a few running backs are always in the mix and getting touches, which is good because it preserves their health, and they're fresh for the NFL. Hopefully, and Nate Noel is going to be there soon enough. The thing last year, you had to just watch what was going on with App State, and if you were watching, you saw what the issues were with Chase Bryce. And going into last season, I said one thing, I kept echoing it. Chase Bryce just has to be competent. That's all he has to do, and App State's going to go places, and he was not competent in the slightest. He folded under pressure numerous times, and that's unfortunate because if he was competent, they win a lot more ball games. To go on to my surprise team, since I did not go to App State, and I stayed in the same division here as South Alabama, going with the Raging Cajuns, who had a very disappointing season last year. Basically, like with ULL, we always think about the rushing attack, their successful running backs. Montrell Johnson found success at Florida. Elijah Mitchell found success, got to the NFL, thrived with the Niners. Chris Smith just departed. You're now looking for the next guy. The next guy is Draylon Washington. We always know this with ULL. You're going to find that success in the trenches. The offensive line plays really good. Wow, they lost Osiris Torrance. He found success as well. AJ Gilly's coming in. He's going to be the next guy that's really good. Draylon Washington, you could look really cool on Twitter, in front of your friends and stuff. If you just tweet out like Draylon Washington's going to be a star. ULL has a monster in their backfield. Draylon Washington. Invest all your stocks into him and watch them take off, and then thank me in October or November or whatever when he's taking over the Sun Belt. He's a household name. He's rushing for touchdowns every week. He's carving up defenses, juking defenders out of their shoes. Draylon Washington's a former track star. The speed translates to the football field. And I hit on Sun Belt running back breakouts more than anyone else. Draylon Washington's next in line. You just have to trust me. I was on Elijah Mitchell. I was on Chris Smith. I was on Montrell Johnson. I was on Nate Noel and Cam Peoples, and name the Sun Belt running back. And I was talking about him before that blew up. Draylon Washington's next, dude.
I'm buying it. I mean, I'm gonna do this exact thing that you said. I'm gonna tweet it out and then brag about how it was my idea and I was the one that called it.
Go for it. I give you permission.
So that's your surprise team, ULL.
Yeah.
my surprise team is, like I said, the same as my winner is App State. My player to watch is, I already know, last conference, Mountain West, I overcompensated and took a special teams player just so in the Sun Belt I could be as basic as possible and pick Frank Gore Jr. as my player to
Yeah.
watch. I know it's the obvious pick, but I almost think in a weird way he's maybe underappreciated because I feel like everybody knows who he is because of his name. It's like, oh, it's Frank Gore Jr. and people talk about him as Frank Gore's son and all this, but I think people don't actually understand how good he is. I think people maybe think he's like well known just because of his name, but if his name was Frank anything else, he would still be one of the most exciting players to watch in this conference and in all of college football. Really, the stuff that they do to get the ball in his hands, which the past couple of years has been an indictment on how bad the Southern Miss team has been, and they've
Yeah.
basically just been like, let's get this guy the ball by any means possible. But at the same time, it's almost more impressive what he's been able to do the last couple of years with having really no talent around him and defenses basically being like, hey, we know they're going to put the ball in this guy's hands. Like, how do we stop him? And they still haven't really been able to. So I think that this team will be better than the Southern Miss teams we've seen in the last couple of years. I don't know how high their ceiling really could be, but they're definitely going to be more competitive than I think we've seen them be at all since Frank Gore Jr. has been there. So I think this could be the year that he goes to even a higher level of not just being like, oh, that's cool, it's Frank Gore Jr., to being like, oh my God, this guy's like the real deal. So I'm really excited to watch him this year, as I'm sure everybody is. But
Yeah.
I
I think that there's legitimate arguments to be made that he's a top 5 running back in the sport. If you're looking at group of 5 running backs right now, I think you have 1A, 1B maybe with him and Jonty from Boise State. Well, I would put Jonty at 2, but I think that those are a top running. Nobody else can do 1A, 1B for those two. But okay, those are 2 top running backs in the group of 5. Frank Gore Jr. and Ashton Jonty. And I'm glad that you brought up Frank Gore and talked up Southern Miss a little because that was my win total team was the over 5. I think
that's
that's
my
too
win
low.
total too.
Yeah,
It's my win
yeah, like
total.
they could very
Yeah.
easily go to a bowl game. I don't know why it's only 5. I think that's a bit weird. Yeah, you're gonna lose at Florida State. He kind of talked about them getting Tulane at home, though. That's tricky. At Arkansas State, they should beat Texas State. They should beat Old Dominion. You know, probably not beating at South Alabama, at App State, but UL Monroe, like there's 6 wins here pretty easily.
Yeah. I think they're a bold team for sure.
Yeah, then I would look out for Ty Mims, a receiver with electric blazing speed, and Jay Stanley at safety is a straight up dog.
Yeah, I think this team's going to improve a lot in a team that he's not the only focus of the defense, that Frank Gore is going to be even better than what we've seen. So we disagree a bit on the champion, although I do agree with you that South Alabama is going to win that division, and then obviously in the championship game anything can happen. But I'm trying to make a bit of a bold prediction in this conference, going with App State. But then a couple of great players to watch. You're basically staking your reputation on
Yeah.
your player to watch in this conference.
Yeah,
And then
he wasn't even my player to watch.
oh, that wasn't even your player to
No,
watch.
I was just
Oh,
talking
geez.
him up, dude. My player to watch would be Jared Brown at Coastal. I think he's arguably the most underrated receiver in the group of 5. You see a lot of like Sunbelt receiver rankings, and he's never at the top. He's never talked about as Coastal's best receiver, and everyone's just straight up wrong. He's the best receiver Coastal has. He's the best receiver in the Sun Belt. He's a top. He's one of the top receivers in the group of five. People really don't know his talent, and he didn't know his own talent. When we were talking to Grayson McCall for our magazine, because I wrote a piece on him, I had to bring up Jared Brown and ask Grayson about him. And Grayson said, yeah, so like Jared Brown, he's a monster. He's just blazing quick and everything. When you get the ball in his hands, anything could happen. He's electric after the catch, but Jared didn't know how good he was. And I had to like kind of tell him, like, Jared, you're a really good player, man. Like the NFL could definitely be in your future. Just take the sport more seriously and believe in yourself. Jared Brown isn't aware of how good he can be now that he's got Grayson McCall screaming in his ear, like, you could be an NFL draft pick, man. Jared Brown's going to take off. When you get the ball in his hands, like Grayson said, anything could happen.
No, that's awesome. That's good insight from Grayson McCall, who obviously knows what he's talking about. When it comes
Yeah.
to offensive stars, offensive firepower. So few players to watch in the Sun Belt. Always one of the most fun conferences between all those top teams. It should be another exciting year in the Fun Belt. Do you have anything else before we close out with Independence?
No, not really.
Yeah, I think we hit on the big teams in this conference. So
Oh, well, I guess
the
Malik Hornsby is going to be fun to watch at Texas State with JG Kinney. We'll see how that goes. I guess that's the one closing thought. Sorry for cutting you
no,
off.
that's fine. No, it's a good closing thought. But yeah, independence, the amount of independent teams is dwindling. Obviously, we talked earlier about a couple of independents that are joining conferences, Liberty, New Mexico State. The only four independent teams left are Notre Dame, Army, UConn, and UMass. Very interesting group of teams. It's going to be a really interesting year for Notre Dame. Obviously, they bring in Sam Hartman, which is maybe the most like high profile transfer in all of college football, is Sam Hartman. Going from Wake Forest, where he had a ridiculously successful career, to Notre Dame. But then kind of the wild move of Tommy Rees leaving Notre Dame. He's no longer going to be there. It seemed like he was kind of ready to have that partnership with Sam Hartman, but that's not going to happen. Then we have Army, UConn, UMass. So obviously there's no conference winner for us to talk about here. So I'm just going to kind of ask you if you have a unique take on any of these teams or any specific players to watch from any of these four teams.
Yeah, to kind of, I guess, skim through it. If you're not watching Notre Dame corner Benjamin Morrison, you're messing up. That's going to be a future top 15 draft pick, you would think. I gave my surprise team to Army, because while you are high on the service academies, I worry about Army. I think that the transition with the offense is going to be a little bit harder than Navy's transition of the offense is. I think it's going to be really tough for Army to go out there and kind of convert to this new scheme, albeit it's going to be a lot of running still. And Josh Lingenfelter is one of the better tight end blockers in the country. I just think that the transition is going to be pretty hard for their offense, and the schedule is by no means easy. There's absolute wars everywhere you look. We talk about UTSA. You're going to Syracuse. You're playing Troy. You're going at LSU. You have Air Force. Holy Cross isn't a team to overlook. I think I ranked them as like number 8 in the FCS. You have Coastal, and then of course you have Navy. So many tough games on Army's schedule for a team that is going to have to transition their offense. And while they have really talented players, I just think that the transition period is going to maybe take a little bit longer, and it's not going to be easy for the personnel to thrive immediately. Like, I don't think they have the personnel right now for what they're trying to go with, but I guess the lone shining bright there, the lone shining bright light there is that the beginning of the schedule, you have 2 weeks to figure it out with UL Monroe and Delaware State before you jump into the fire against UTSA. So if you could figure it out early, you could build some solid momentum if you upset UTSA. But yeah, I'm sorry, I worry about Army a little bit.
No, that's all right. I think Army is in an interesting spot where if everything clicks, they could easily win 6 games, 7 games, and be a solid bowl team. And I think it could come down to honestly the Navy game, end of the season, Army Navy. Like I said when we were talking about Navy, I think it's totally possible that both of those teams could be sitting at 5 wins, and
Yeah.
that game would be the sixth win for both teams. But then my win total pick for the Independents, after about 2 hours and 15 minutes, it finally pays off that I'm wearing this hat because I'm going with UConn over 4.5 wins. I'm obviously I'm a UConn fan, mostly been a UConn basketball fan over recent years, but UConn football is awesome. I think if UConn football can be good again, it would be really good for the sport. I hope that however conference realignment ends up with whatever the Big East and AAC are all doing across different sports. I don't know how everything's going to work out, but I hope things work out for UConn because UConn football, if it's good, can be really exciting for the sport. Obviously, Jim Mora did a ton in year one in terms of making this kind of like I was talking about with Akron, just making them not a laughing stock, basically. Like they're
Yeah.
a real football team that teams can't just show up and they win as long as they're on the field. Like you have to play a good game if you want to beat UConn. They have an exciting running back in Victor Rosa. They have a schedule that I think is kind of perfect for them because it's not by any means an easy schedule. But I think it's kind of the perfect mix of challenging games and winnable games for them. They start off with NC State, and then they have to go at Georgia State. They have a home game against FIU, which should be a win, a home game against Duke, which I think could be a really exciting game, and Utah State. Then they go at Rice and against South Florida, at Boston College, at Tennessee, at James Madison, uh, which is a pretty tough stretch. Through the middle of that schedule at BC, at Tennessee, at JMU. But then they do close the season with 2 games that I think should be comfortable wins for them at home against Sacred Heart and at home against UMass. And I think they get over that 4.5 win total. And honestly, I think they find a way to win 6 games and we see UConn in a bowl game this year, which would be amazing.
We need that. Of course, man. Christian Haynes, legit NFL draft prospect that you've got fortified in your offensive line. He's going to make some serious waves and, make a lot of money in next spring. Yeah, I mean, how can you not root for UConn and Jamora's spooky haunted mansion?
Yeah. In terms of UMass, I don't really have much on UMass. I think they're a bad team that's going to be bad. Do you have anything interesting about UMass?
I did want to go through each team and just give a few players to watch since the independent's so slim. I kind of already
Sure.
gave Morrison for Notre Dame, so I'll also give like Cam Hart, Audric Estime. For UConn, I already gave Christian Haynes, Jackson Mitchell, obviously too. UMass, Carlos Davis transferring from Western Carolina. At the very least, you have a fun quarterback at UMass with a rocket for an arm that, while not always accurate, still got a live arm and he moves around the pocket and just makes plays with his feet. So Carlos is fun to watch, but like legit, I would look out for Jordan Mahoney. I don't know what his future holds. He's a cornerback there at versatile cornerback there at UMass. I don't know what his future holds, but he is somebody that maybe we should be looking at as a potential transfer candidate after this season that sees a significant rise in program like play, like could rise to a much better program, right? Or maybe he's getting NFL draft looks. Very low key player, dude. Mahoney's a very good player, very good corner. I would look for. I kind of already gave Lingenfelter at Army. How about Finucane on their offensive line as well as a dog? Jordan Booby Law on their offensive line is also someone to watch. I don't know how the new stuff works with the NFL and the military, like service academy players, and if with who they're taking and whatnot. I don't know how any of that works. But Law and Finucane and Lincoln-Falter are all guys. Even Isaiah Austin, who plays receiver at Army, that's a guy that could like get to NFL training camp and make something happen. And if he wasn't playing for a service academy, he would have so many highlight reel plays. Um, he's a fun player. I would actually, if you haven't read our magazine, I would consider buying it just so you could read the piece that we have on Isaiah Alston, on kind of his journey, what it's like playing for a service academy team. And he kind of went in. I didn't write the piece, our guy Dan Keegan did, but he there's a quote where he says, "The brotherhood is the sole purpose. I'm still here, honestly." And that just kind of goes to show you where Isaiah Alston's been at and how important this team and this family has been to him in his life. So that's a really good piece that we have in our magazine.
No, that's awesome. I mean, there's so many of these service academy guys that just have great stories, and yeah, I mean, I've read basically the entire magazine by now, so a lot of good stuff to read in there. And so do you have an official number one player to watch? Obviously, you've listed a lot of guys, but do you have
I would just
a
say Morrison.
favorite? I don't know. I went again. I'm riding off the coattails of my kicker pick, going with another basic one. And this is somebody that everybody's going to watch, but I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about Sam Hartman. Because I really do think it's fascinating. I think it's the most interesting transfer in college football in terms of, I'm honestly not 100% sure how it's going to work out. I think if everything clicks for Notre Dame, I think they could be I guess an 11-win team. I don't think they could beat USC and Ohio State. Probably just a 10-win team. I don't know if they're beating either of them, honestly. But they do have them both at home. So if they beat one of them, I wouldn't be shocked. And they obviously have to go to Clemson too. So it's a brutal schedule for them. But I think if everything clicks, they could be really, really good. But there's just something like that I can't even describe that's like in the back of my mind, thinking that this could be a bit of a failure, the Sam Hartman Notre Dame experience. So can you give anything to either tell me that it's ridiculous that that's in the back of my mind, or say that you agree that something could go wrong here?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. I'll get the nice things out the way first. One, Jeremiah Love, incoming freshman there, running back, is going to be a star. Their backfield is in good hands for years to come, and he's going to be an NFL player. Two, Sam Hartman should be very happy that he's going to be working closely with Joe Alt on the offensive line and Blake Fisher. Joe Alt should be a top 3, top 4 pick in the NFL draft. I guess I could say top 5 too, but if he doesn't go 3 or 4, I'll be very surprised. He and Olu Fashanu of Penn State are like the clear premier offensive tackles in the country. Joe Alt, former tight end, 6'8", an absolute behemoth. He's a monster. He moves very well. And then Blake Fisher, I think, should be getting more talk as like a top 45, 50 draft pick. Now, like the doubt creeping in, I think that there's a very real world where you have Duke beating at least one of Notre Dame or Clemson. So if Duke doesn't beat Clemson, Notre Dame loses at Duke week 6, and maybe that just starts a spiral. There is no way that Notre Dame team should lose at Louisville. So we'll give them the win at Louisville, but then if they lose to SC, what if they drop the ball against Pitt somehow? That'd be embarrassing. You're probably going to lose at Clemson, in my honest opinion. If you lose the Sam Hartman Bowl against Wake Forest, I think you have to. I think you have to fold the program. I think it's that bad, and that for a week 11 matchup, Notre Dame Wake Forest should be really fun to watch. You have, as
Yeah.
talked about, Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison is Notre Dame corners to look out for. Wake Forest, while they lose A.T. Perry, while they lose Sam Hartman, the passing attack is still going to move the needle. Jamal Banks, 6'5" demon. Watch out for him at receiver. And then Donovan Green, too. That's going to be a fascinating matchup between those two receivers and Notre Dame's corners. I don't think it's ever going to be far-fetched to say that Notre Dame disappoints and drops the ball. I mean, what a story if we're talking about Navy walking out of Dublin with like a 26-23 OT win over Notre Dame. Our sport never fails to amaze. It seems so preposterous to say on July 17th that something like that could happen. And I don't believe that could happen. But if we're sitting there in week 0 watching the seconds tick away in regulation, Navy and Notre Dame are tied, are we going to be surprised?
We've definitely seen crazier things.
We've seen the story happen before, and we've seen crazier things. Exactly.
So yeah, I think Notre Dame's an interesting case because in 9 of their games, they really should win the game, and in 3 of the games, it's going to be really, really tough. So it's a kind of a weird schedule, but we will see. Only time will tell. That week 0 game in Dublin will maybe tell us a lot about whether they can take care of business against Navy, or even if they win, if they make things look a little shaky, could be a sign of things to come. But we've been going for a long time. I'm just going to close out with one question. And that question is, of all of these teams we've talked about, 5 group of 5 conferences and the independents, is there any chance that any team could make the college football playoff this year?
I mean, I guess technically, on a technicality, yeah, because Western Kentucky goes 12-0, and then they go and that has a win at Ohio State, and then they go 13-0. Like, yeah, technically, yeah, it could happen. But I mean, would a 13-0 Western Kentucky even attract voters' attention enough to get in there?
Yeah.
I don't even think it would, and that's pathetic.
Yeah, so I guess that's the real question. Obviously, if Notre Dame goes undefeated with wins against Ohio State, right, Clemson, and USC, then obviously they would be in. And so that's really what it comes down to, is who even has the schedule where even if they go undefeated, they could get in. And I guess Western Kentucky,
UTSA would have the schedule. Tulane would have the schedule. They'd have the South Alabama, they'd have UTSA, they'd have Ole Miss. UTSA would have Tulane and Tennessee and Houston, like most notably, obviously. But I think it goes to show that I don't think the committee would put a 13-0 Western Kentucky game, Western Kentucky team with a win at Ohio State in the playoff. I think that goes to show that like nobody could do it.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, this has been awesome.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. One more thing.
To give like the reason why, it's because of this garbage of preconceived thoughts that like media and fans and like committee and they have and stuff. Preconceived thoughts. Like Cincinnati only got into the playoff because there was a preconceived notion that they were going to be really good, and there was like preseason talk about them and everything. But it doesn't work that way for a Conference USA team like Western Kentucky. They wouldn't move the needle enough. They don't start highly ranked. They don't start ranked. They don't start with the national media talking about them. If in this preposterous like fairy tale world that we're living in right now, where they beat Ohio State, they would get a week of press, and then that would be it. And then maybe the national media goes to talk about them in like week 8 again when they're still undefeated. It just doesn't move the needle enough. And then the first top 25 from the committee, they'd be ranked like 18th with a win at Ohio State. It's so garbage.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you ended on that, because the reason that we just went 2.5 hours here is because we love these group of 5 teams.
And they
It's what
deserve.
makes college football great is these teams and these stories that we get out of these teams. And I can promise you that if Western Kentucky beats Ohio State in week 3, for us, it will not be a 1-week narrative. It will be we'll be pounding the table the rest of the season to get them into the college football playoff if they somehow pull off that upset. So
It's not gonna happen, but
no, it's not.
living in that world is pretty dumb.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it until the game's over. We can say that it's possible. But this has been awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. I don't know if anybody else could have dove in as deep into these teams as we did. So I really appreciate you coming on. And once again, we talked about it a bunch, but if you haven't, go buy the magazine because it's really good. It has a deeper dive into these group of 5 teams than really any of the other magazines that I've read. So if you like these teams, definitely buy it. And do you just want to let people know where they can follow you anywhere else?
Yeah, you could follow me at Blutman27 on the Twitter sphere, at NoContextCFB as well. I be tweeting. At TPortalCFB is our college football multimedia brand. You can follow us there on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel as well, Spotify for podcasts and all that, the Transfer Portal CFB. And if you're interested, if you're still listening, first off, congrats to you on making it this far. You are an absolute warrior, and we applaud you. If you have interest in buying our season preview magazine, it's through Gumroad. It's on pinned tweets on the Transfer Portal CFB Twitter page and NoContextCFB. And yeah, like Blake said, there is in-depth quality and quantity on each and every team, all 133, about 1,200 words written for each team. I don't think other outlets could say that they did that. And I think that we could also add to that by saying we have 20 plus player interviews ranging from Blake Corum to Giovanni McCoy, Grayson McCall, Jaden Knott, all interesting stories of these guys' lives or journeys that they've been on, NIL and all that. I think we separate ourselves from the bunch doing that, and I think that those player pieces are remarkable and really good reads. So yeah, thank you if you buy our magazine.
Yeah, that's again also why I made sure to mention it at the beginning, because I had a feeling that some people aren't brave enough to make it this far into the episode. But yeah, thanks again for joining me. Make sure to buy the magazine, follow Liam everywhere, and follow those accounts. Some of the best accounts to follow during college football season. And thanks for listening.